Hi, it's Elaine with Curb Vulture, and welcome to the Curb Vulture Reselling Podcast, where we talk to resellers across the world, talking about how they get into reselling, their tips and tricks. And I'm so glad that you're here and you're joining us. Today, we have Heidi from Mid Modern Arc, and she's going to kind of tell us a little bit about herself. So, as we get started, I just want her to say her real name, her Instagram handle, and where you can find her on social media. And then she's going to launch into telling us a little bit about herself, how she gets started in reselling. So Heidi, take it away.
Hi, Elaine. Thank you for having me. So you can find me. My main platform is Instagram. It's to reach me, you would look up modern_arc_mid-century. And most recently, you can shop me in real life too. So I have a booth downtown at the new vintage shop called Potluck, which is on South Lamar.
All right, in Austin, Texas, for those of you who don't know that we're in Austin. So she's in Austin. I'm in a little suburb off of Austin as well. So that's how we know each other. So Heidi, tell me a little bit about how you got started and what is your specialty, because you have a specialty.
So I got started basically because I was a stay-at-home mum. I was going a little crazy. I'd always worked my whole entire life, had worked full time up until I had a child. And basically, a friend introduced me. She was flipping, I'll use that word loosely, mid-century modern furniture. And she invited me to start doing the same. I quickly worked out, I think it took me about literally 2 pieces to realize that the quality of mid-century furniture was so amazing that it was really a wanted market. And Austin, it was during COVID, was actually a super hot market at the time. So it was something that I fell in love with first and foremost, but then really enjoyed the process of selling.
Yeah, I can concur. 2020 to 2022 was probably the craziest time for resellers because people were just like flooding into Austin.
Mm-hmm.
So you do sell vintage furniture, but
Mm-hmm.
you specifically focus on really high end or more like walnut, mid century modern furniture. So I'm not going to necessarily ask you how you find it, but what was that
Mm-hmm.
very first piece that you found? And kind of tell us a little bit, like walk me through what that looked like when you find this piece and what you were thinking when you found it, and then explain maybe a little bit of the process of refinishing that.
Sure. So my first piece was actually a teak credenza. So I guess to touch on what you were talking about, the most common wood types we find are teak and walnut. Teak often imported from Europe, and walnut a very, very staple American furniture product used in some wonderful mid-century pieces. But it was a credenza. It was cheap. And I remember picking it up and thinking, how on earth am I going to fit it in my vehicle? So again, I think something that you learn very quickly is that it's enjoyable work, but it's really hard, and you need to find out what's going to work for you in terms of loading, unloading safely, but also just transporting in a safe way. So for me, it sold, I think, probably for 5 times the price I bought it for within a 24-hour period. So I think, as we were talking about, the market during COVID in Austin, Texas was just hot. I feel like everything and anything you listed was snapped up straight away. I will say that I think over time, I think the market has become very competitive. There are a lot of resellers doing this. And for me, what is my most important part is the quality of my product. So when I first started, knowing very little about mid-century, I would buy everything. I would buy anything I would see, usually on Facebook Marketplace. I would buy it, drive, often without seeing the item, and sometimes driving up to 5 hours to pick items up. I do still do that. But again, with the market changing, my focus has also changed. So I personally tend to focus on more unique pieces. And instead of buying everything and anything, I now focus in on buying high quality pieces. So yes, you pay more, but I also think the profitability is higher. So I refinish, as you know, I'm very strict with my refinishing process. So for those that follow me or are new to finding me, you will see very quickly that I refinish back to the original factory correct refinishing process. So basically my items, my goal always is to return them to how they would have looked on the showroom floor way back in, the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think you were one of the first people that were like, please don't use Howard's Restore Finish
Yeah.
on your pieces. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I love it so much. It's so easy. But I did, just to let you know, did buy me some Oz polish. I love it. It's great. But I'm sorry. I'm just such a believer in the Howard's Restore Finish.
Yeah.
But I totally can, understand how, somebody that's like almost a purist, really wants to make sure that we're taking care of that quality wood. And I think Howard's Restore Finish, one of the reasons is because it probably has an alcohol base, so it kind of dries out the wood, correct?
Yeah, correct. So what we see often is people putting like poly or Restore Finish, or what's another one? There's a few out there. And basically, I think the design, like if you're staging a piece, it's going to look fantastic. But my opinion, and I guess what I've learned from years of refinishing, is that over time, so Howard's refinish, for example, may start to eat through the finish of the piece. And poly, for example, will start to discolor and yellow a piece. So I guess the goal for me is to really make sure that the piece presents on the day that a person buys it in the same way that it will 10, 20, 30 years on. But specifically, this is to mid-century modern furniture. So I want to be really clear about that, because there are products that can be applied to say, for example, antique pieces. That would be a different recommendation to mid-century. And the reason being that mid-century usually has a lacquer-based finish. So the Oz Cream, which you're right, is my go-to golden product. Hopefully you like it, Aline.
I do. I love it. I love it. When I finally was brave enough, because we have the 000 wool. And I was like, oh, I don't like, it's so scary because it's so scratchy to like, rub it on there, but it actually works. It's kind of that moment of like, whenever you've used, I don't know if you've ever worked with epoxy, you're supposed to sand it and you're like, oh my gosh, like sanding it seems so counterintuitive, but it actually, when you put that other layer on, it really makes it so much brighter and cleaner. But it's like not what you want to see when you're in the middle of the process. You're like, trust the process, trust the process.
Exactly. And that's so important. And I think good on you for trying it too. And I think, again, so much of what we do is trial and error. And just being able to put up your hand and be like, I'm going to give it a go and see how it goes, and be prepared that there might be mistakes, but again, taking it as a learning opportunity. Oz Cream, funnily enough, it's for those that don't know it, and I did have it, but I haven't got it in my hand. I was meant to have it with me, but it's used to condition and polish mid-century modern furniture. But I have found, and I don't know if you've tried, I use it on my brass. I use it on my leather.
I use it on everything.
Everything.
Yeah,
it is so good.
It is such a magic product. It's a magic salve, for sure.
And you can get it fairly easily too. So, and it's, I think, not too expensive because it will last a long time.
It's like for a pretty big bottle like this big, it's like $30. So
exactly.
It's not super expensive. You can get a smaller one for $11, but the $30 one is way more cost effective. So let me pause right there and talk about, you said something about how it's like a, what is one of your like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, biggest mistake story in refinishing?
I have many, 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 many. And even now, 4 years later, I make mistakes every day. So what the difference now is that I believe in myself more than I did when I first started. And I know that hopefully I'll be able to bring it back. So in refinishing, I think it's knowing the right or correct process. So if you skip steps or you shortcut your way through things, you can destroy a piece. So that would probably be my biggest tip. But the other thing is asking your husband who needed a desk whether he wants a desk that you're about to refinish. So I think sometimes showing a piece to somebody in its unfinished state when it first comes in, which is usually grotty, grimy, a mess, going ahead and listing it and selling it, and then having said husband at the end of the process come to help deliver it and not want to put it in the car because he's changed his mind because now he likes the desk and thinks it's amazing in its refinished state, and literally like grappling with my buyer to keep it. It was pretty embarrassing but funny at the same time.
Yeah, no, they actually just sold this one mid-century. It was a Danish piece that I had in my house, and I was like, oh yeah, I think my husband was like, I love this piece. We have to keep it. And he was so like, I had changed some stuff around. And I was like, this is just not working in our space anymore. And he was like, but I love it. And I was like, it's kind of useless for us right now. Like, it's not going to work for us. And he was just like, it was hard for him to let that one go. But we sold it for a pretty penny because, so let me talk about that. So talk a little bit about Danish pieces because they're a little bit different than the normal, because it's almost like I call it IKEA furniture from the 1970s. Like, it's not fully, it's an interesting product. So talk about that a little bit.
So teak is European made. It's I think a more delicate wood. You have to be far more careful with it. For example, if you're stripping or sanding, you can burn through veneer very easily. So what we see in teak often, and I'm sure you've seen it, is particle board. So I think a lot of people don't realize, and they will often ask, and same with the walnut pieces, about whether something is solid wood. So for the record, mid-century modern pieces, 85% of them are not solid wood. So
yeah, I think that's a really, really big point to make.
Yeah.
I literally, outside of Amish furniture, have never seen a solid wood piece. It's usually a higher quality veneer on top of a lower quality wood. It's still solid wood, but it is not the same high quality wood throughout. And people will be like, well, it's not solid. And you're like, you don't know furniture. And so you really have to educate your customer on the differences. So keep going about this.
And honestly, it's probably because there has been some misconstrued information out there. And I think people's mind automatically goes to solid wood equals high quality. So I like to say that it's all wood constructed. And then I usually explain exactly as you said. So like the teak wood or the walnut or the Brazilian, which is my favorite, is often the high quality wood veneer. Veneer being a thin slice of wood would cover a wood substrate. So, and the substrate is usually made from a cheaper material like oak or pine.
But it's still high quality because the thing is, a difference between like particle board with a wood veneer is particle board is it's little pieces. And so even the way that the wood attaches to that substrate is different, is higher quality, has more stickability.
Again, it sounds like a bad word, but I think you touched on it before. When these pieces were built, yes, it was particle board, but as you said, so this is just teak, by the way, walnut is not. The high quality wood is exactly what's used in the surrounding or the casing. And it's really different because now what we see is MDF, and MDF is like the artificial everything. It's your IKEA, go to the as is and look at how things have broken down within 2 or 3 months. Just being on a showroom floor, you will not see that with these pieces. And you know that because they stand the testament of time. So often by the time we're seeing them or getting them, they are already 60 or 70 years old. So that really should be the telltale sign of the quality.
Absolutely. So when you're looking for a piece, and I'm sure you're like me, I mean, we're constantly learning. What are some of the things you look for? And when you're like, I want to make sure that this is a high quality piece, and maybe you've never seen this before, what what is a person that's listening to this? It's a reseller going to go into the Goodwill, the thrift store, the Facebook. What are they looking for? What are the tips you could give there?
Yeah, so I think I trust myself. So I choose pieces that I would want personally. It has to stand out and be something that I would want in my home and that suits my aesthetic. With that said, I think a smart reseller is also looking at their customer base and the analytics and what that is telling you. You need to get to know your customer and who they buy from and what they want. And that really needs to be a focus of what you're looking for. I do think with the market as it is at the moment, people really, really want those high quality pieces. They don't want quick flips. And I think, and I see it all the time, and I buy pieces from other resellers, and honestly, it is a sore point for me. Cleaning your pieces is a basic thing. So when something comes in, even if it's in the most amazing condition, check your drawers, check they all glide well. If they don't, put wax or WD-40 on them, make sure they do, and just clean the insides, because the stuff we find, and I'm sure you've probably got some gross stories too, is pretty bad. And the injustice, I think, is that supporting each other to do those is going to help everyone. Because if you've got a customer and they're buying a piece, like a vintage piece, for the first time, and they have a bad experience, the chances are they're probably not going to buy from any of us ever again. So yeah, so they're probably the biggest things. But tips in terms of if you're reselling, and I'm sure you have some great ones, so I'd love to hear from you as well. But I personally think staging is everything. So I'm someone who, I let the piece, I guess because I refinish, I let the piece speak for itself. And so I have very minimal props in my photos, but I also use little things to help my branding. So in my photos, if you have a look at my Instagram, you'll see brass ducks, for example, I used in almost every post, and the same with the type of rug I use. And my hope is that when people are out there and if they've bought from me, they will start to see, oh, there's, one of Heidi's pieces, and it might not be on Instagram, but it might be on Facebook Marketplace, and automatically they can start to associate a bit of a branding, I guess, and correlation to who might be selling it. So yeah.
So when you're looking for a piece, like, and you're looking at the actual piece, like you're studying it.
Yeah.
What are some of the tips? Like, how do you know it's vintage? How do you know it's not just a weird, IKEA furniture that just you happen to not, because I actually just saw was it you? Somebody listed a whole list of IKEA furniture that's been coming out lately that is like to die for. Amazing. And it very much, like, if I saw that at a thrift store in a year, I might think, oh, that's mid-century. How do you know it's actually from the era you are?
Yeah. Do you know what? I think that's a really good point. I guess I know just because I've been doing it for so long, but I think there are some really good replicas out there, and I think it's kind of hard. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely made a mistake of buying something that I thought was vintage, and then I get it in and it's not. And it's because I haven't probably looked at it closely. So I think asking questions, like if it's not clear to you, asking questions of the seller. And I think any good reseller, again, should be able to answer those questions, because you're right. I see pieces advertised as vintage or advertised with a maker's, like a high-end maker's name. And then you're like, hey, can you show me, like, is there a maker's mark, or how did you ID this? And they just can't tell you. And to me, that's a little bit of a red flag. So I guess.
I can definitely concur. I'm sure. I think someone was posting recently about how everybody calls, the chrome chairs Milo Bauman. And it's like, they're not always Milo. I mean, there's Simon, there's a lot of other people. And then there's the knockoffs, like even like Drexel or Henadron. There are, once that became popular in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, like, there were knockoff brands. So it doesn't mean that it's not vintage. It just may not be that name brand that people, I
Mhm.
mean, you can always put in the style of, but
Mhm.
labeling it Henna Drawn when you're not seeing a
Yeah.
maker's mark, is something that, just need to
Yeah.
be careful about. I mean, I've definitely done that.
Yeah.
I posted a rug one time that was actually an IKEA wool rug that was, it
Mhm.
was handcrafted in
Mhm.
Turkey or Morocco, wherever it was, but it was
Mhm.
from IKEA, and I had posted it for
Mhm.
like way more. And my, like, another reseller was like, "Hey, by the
It's
way,"
not.
and I was like, "Oh," I already had a buyer
Mhm.
too for it for like,
Mhm.
more money. And I was like,
Mhm.
"Hey, just let you know, this reseller friend of mine told me that it was not vintage. I just want to be very,
Mhm.
very transparent with you." And we
Mhm.
agreed upon a different price, still made money on it. But, integrity is everything when it comes
Yes.
to reselling, for sure.
Yes. And I love the point that you just made, that I think sometimes if you've made the mistake and it's modern, but you love it, you present it well, and you're honest in your disclosure, the chances of selling it and finding a buyer who loves it just as much is really high too.
Yeah.
So again, like, if you make the mistake and you find out it's modern, don't be put off by it.
Yeah.
And I do want to make the point that some really high end pieces, it can be true mid century modern, but it may not be the original maker, if that makes sense. So it still was made in the era of, using the same materials. Kent Coffee Perspectives one, I see knockoffs of it all the time, but the knockoffs are beautiful too. So again, like, if there's a buyer or a market, then absolutely grab it. And I do want to touch and kind of protect IKEA a little bit, not modern IKEA, but old IKEA. So there is some,
Vintage
I
IKEA.
don't know if
Yeah.
you've had
I mean,
vintage
even,
IKEA. I have a
I don't know
lab
a lot about the
downstairs.
company now,
Mm-hmm.
IKEA, but I mean, I'm assuming
Mm-hmm.
they still kind of operate on similar principles that they did back
Mm-hmm.
then, maybe modernized, maybe less quality focused, but I think they're still a pretty good. I mean, I still would shop there. I mean, I think those
Mm-hmm.
bookcases for kids, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not called.
Mm-hmm.
They were called something else. I can't remember what the new name.
Yeah. I have a lamp from there now at 70s IKEA, and it is my favorite. It's kind of got an amber, I think it's just plastic base to it, but it's got a beautiful, warm, soft light. And yeah, I wouldn't give it up for anybody.
Yeah, there's some definitely higher end IKEA pieces. One of the first pieces, I actually found
Mm-hmm.
it on the side of the road, and it was Brandon that, and at Line, is he Line Curve Matter? I can't remember. He changed his name at some point, but he bought it from me, or he texted me. He didn't buy it
Mm-hmm.
from me. He texted me, and I was a brand new reseller, like just still selling stuff that I found on the side of the road. And he was like, "Did you know that's vintage IKEA?" And he actually had the ad that showed. And,
Oh.
and Aubrey just recently also, it's
Mm,
a pair of like swivel chairs, and they're solid
mm.
wood, I think
Oh,
birch
they
or
were
birch wood,
fabulous.
and
They were
they
fabulous.
swivel. And this
Yeah.
one like had the original fabric, and it was like a
Yeah.
leather suede. And I recovered it, and he said, "Did you know that not only did you use modern IKEA fabric, that is a vintage IKEA chair?" So it was like kind of just like a
Awesome.
great synchronicity there. It was a fun moment, and that's how I met Brandon and
Yeah.
continued to talk to him. And he eventually bought some chairs. I think it was him that
Mm-hmm.
bought some chairs that were Cyman or
Mm-hmm.
similar, kind of that Milo Bauman style, and resold them for a huge profit because he
Mm-hmm.
sells on Cherish and
Mm-hmm.
First Dibs and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me, where are you selling? So where's your like highest sell point? Are you still Facebook Marketplace, Instagram, or just refinishing clients by referrals? What's going on there?
So I'm going to say probably 80% of my sales are on Instagram. I do have a lot of repeat buyers, so sometimes I'm sourcing pieces that are often pre-sold even before listing. So again, especially in quieter times, I think if you can source pieces for a client who already trusts you and your business, then I think that's a great way to go. So Facebook Marketplace is still, I think, an option. But like you said, I think you have to know what you're looking for. And honestly, I don't know about you, but I find that I can just be scrolling and looking at it for hours and hours a day. And so I've definitely had to adjust that a little bit, and just because of my work-life balance. But with that said, like, finding that piece, being prepared to get your ass up off the couch and go and get it straight away, because it will go. And I think that's just really important to know too. So you have to be prepared to put the work in terms of, both looking, buying, transporting, selling, restoration, all the things. One thing, again, like supporting each other as resellers. So you and I have similar but also very different, probably similar ethics, but we'll have different pieces. And there might be something that I find and I'm like, yeah, not for my client, but hey, Elaine, what do you think? Would you like it? And honestly, the competition or any cattiness that can go on, I'm not for it. Like if somebody's trying to do a bidding war with me, I just bail out. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. But I do believe that if you support others, they will support you in return. And that is how we grow as a business as well. And also how we can get sales. Because again, if you support other sellers and they might have a client that comes and says, hey, I'm after a table for a dining room, you don't have one, but said person over here has supported your business, you might send them that way. So it's really, really important.
Yeah, I think all ships, all tides raise all ships. So, just supporting us. And I know that you specifically have trained. She used to be Trips and Flips. Now she's Vintage. Sorry, I'm blanking on her name. Haven Estate
yeah.
Sales. She does estate sales now. She was actually a kind of a student of yours, and you were helping her learn the right way to do the work. And that's when I think she probably adopted Oz Polish instead of Howard Restore Finish. So tell me about repairing a piece. You talked about doing the work. What is some of the common mistakes you see in refinishing and how you overcome them? And then walk us maybe through your whole process. Like you get it, you sand it. How does that work?
So it's interesting. I probably don't look too closely at people's mistakes anymore. What I have done, and if you are interested in refinishing, is find your inspirational person or people and follow them. Watch their videos, watch their guides. Don't be afraid to reach out. Like you just gave the example, like Aubrey reached out and she's like, hey, I've got this piece. I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And I'm like, come on over. So you'll find those people, you'll find your tribe who want to help you succeed. So the process is long and it's tedious. And I've done a few videos, but not many, because my goal is not to provide, like I'm not here to provide refinishing knowledge. My goal is to sell my pieces. But most pieces, I think, come in. The most common issue I see, and I'm sure you see it too, is watermarks, smoke stains. I think everyone did a lot of smoking by their bedsides in the 60s and 70s, and just wear and tear. Like even when people are bringing pieces to me for me to custom refinish, I say wrap it in a blanket. I think they're just like, oh, it's already trash, so I'm just going to throw it on the truck and bring it to you. And in the process of transporting, they trash it more, which is not good. So refinishing is many layers and multiple steps. Every piece is different. So I don't think there's a formula that I can give you or give anyone that's like, this is what you do with every piece. But I will say, find your influencers, follow them, look at the products they're using, practicing the steps. So, almost all pieces will need some form of stripping, some form of sanding, some form of color. So I use toners and then a top coat or protective finish. So again, mid-century, often that's lacquer. But it's all going to come down to technique, and that's your trial and error, and that's pushing through being uncomfortable. So again, I can't, and I'm sure you've done the same, be uncomfortable. And if you're doing something and then stop it, walk away, start something else, but come back to it. Like give yourself some confidence and just know that every single person that is refinishing or attempting it has gone through this same issue.
Absolutely. I think giving yourself permission to mess up, your permission to show up incomplete as a reseller and a restorer And, I think that's a great point to remember, is that you're going to make mistakes, and that's part of the learning process. So tell me something, maybe give a couple examples of people that you love to follow who are kind of because I'm the same way. Like, I'm here. I don't really want to teach you how to do things. I mean, I do, just because I'm already filming, and I'll say something, like this, but I'm not going to go through step by step. That's not really my goal. My goal is to sell and to, entertain and, slightly inform, just to get your appetite whet. But who are some of the people that you follow that you're like, they do really good step by step process?
Okay, so again, I guess there's many aspects to this. So I will say, in terms of like growth and, looking at what people want to see in terms of content, I would actually follow you. I would look at things that you're doing. You are growing rapidly. You are doing amazingly. And I hope you're very proud of yourself, especially as a female in this industry. There are so many females in this industry. And that's definitely another thing I underestimated. In terms of refinishing, oh my goodness, I just can't think of their professional names, but I might send you a list.
Yeah, we can put that in the show notes. People you recommend.
I think their first name, which isn't going to help with the business. But Moore's Refinishing, do you know him?
Yes.
Yeah, so he actually pretty much all his content is now on that, and I think he's put out some training as well. But I will say Refinishes is really good. Finding people that have great content that are gaining followers is really good. But also woodworkers, because how often do we get something and it's structurally there's an issue? So you need to learn how to, fix the dovetail on that drawer, or know how to repair that corner. And often it's the woodworkers that have the great tips there. So again,
God love This Old House. That's the one I'm like, This Old House. He's helping me figure out something. So definitely don't discount the bigger accounts that have been doing it for years and years and years as well. So tell me about maybe some of the products. Like we recommended OzPolish. What are some of the basic products that you use, even including some of your electronic products?
So I use my phone for absolutely everything. So, my husband will be like, come and do this on the computer. And I'll be like, I don't remember how. Like, it's been years to me. So again, a phone is enough. In terms of refinishing, I solidly stand by Mohawk products, and I often buy through Klingspor's workshop. So I choose Klingspor's because they are cheaper than most other places I've found, and they do deliver. So if you do like a bulk order, they deliver fairly reasonably. I think it's $10 per order. In terms of sanding, sanding just goes with the territory, right? So I have two sanders. I have a Bosch Orbital, which is $80 from Home Depot. So again, very reasonably priced, in my opinion, and everyone should be able to buy. But then I also have a rectangular sander, which is called a Surf Prep. And the reason it was a lot more money, but the reason I chose it, and I do use it every day and I would recommend it, is it does all the curves and crevices. So, all those hard to get to places, instead of having to hand sand, it will cut down a lot of that time, and you can just go ahead and use it.
Yeah, I don't have one of those yet. My favorite,
but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about. I have an Orbital and I have a mouse sander, but I don't have the one you're talking about. Yeah. My favorite tool is a jigsaw. I don't know why. That's like one of my favorite tools. Probably the easiest saw to use if you're doing some different refinishing, that maybe you're cutting off legs, or that's one of my favorite tools outside of my, DeWalt drill or my sander for sure. So tell me, for the audience, what are some of the, like, what is it, PPE products that you use when you're refinishing?
Oh yeah, very important. So funny funnily enough, I'm actually allergic. So my favorite wood type is Brazilian rosewood. So for those that don't know it, it does have a red undertone to it, and it has kind of very spidery veins in terms of the look to the grain. I'm highly allergic. So I love it and I work on it because of that. But if I'm not wearing protective gear, then I am basically coming out in hives. So a mask is essential, like a respirator, long overalls I do wear, and I will always try, like now I've got my hair back as well. And I think just not shortcutting that. Like I have done that in full disclosure. You know, you're like, oh, there's just this little bit I need to spray.
I'm outside.
Right?
It'll be okay.
But as soon as you're bringing out a chemical, you've got to just put on that mask, even if it's literally 10 seconds of spraying. Because if you do that consistently over years, then, you know, I think that's not going to be great for your health.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the harder areas to like do because you're like, you know, you're like in the mode and you're like, I just want to get this done.
Exactly.
And you're like, I'm outside anyhow. I mean, even holding, like I have one of the big, you know, masks, even just holding it on your face while you're spraying, if you don't want to like, you know, because you've got hair and stuff like that and earrings or something and you don't want to put it on, just holding it up, doing something to protect yourself from those chemicals, because I mean, that's, you know, you never know what kind of Agent Orange is.
No, exactly. And I think the philosophy, because I know you do big pieces too, and I do big pieces, not everybody does, but working smarter, not harder, right? So I don't know, in terms of like moving pieces, I think I'm ever evolving in terms of trying not to break my back. And often I'm alone, and as we just said, like a lot of women are doing this, some on their own too. So, you know, having dollies, having little strategies, like I might use blankets or cardboard to like help me move around. What would one of yours be? I'm curious.
So I have a love-hate relationship with those little,
I
like little
know.
feet.
Yes.
I hate them because they don't ever go over cracks.
And they slip off.
And they slip off. But it does, especially for a hard piece, like a sleeper sofa, you know, just lifting them up, getting somebody, you know, just to slide them under there. That way, when you're moving stuff around your storage unit or your studio, whatever you're working, you know, you don't have to just like push, you know, and put all that strain on your back. You know, I mean, I'm the same way. Like, if you can work smarter and not harder, I mean, getting help. I mean, I have 7 kids, so like, I'm like, hey, I need a kid. They're getting bigger, so they help me move stuff. Or my husband, you know, will come and help. But yeah, I definitely think that it is so important, and we talked about that on the last episode about keeping your core, and especially as you age. You know, you have to be careful because, you know, if you are a single entity business, if your back is out, you're down for the count. You're not making money for sure. So tell me, since you do vintage furniture, tell me your favorite stain colors. Like if you're going to be buying, you know, you said Mohawk or mini wax or whatever colors that you buy. What are the, because I know mine is dark walnut. What is yours?
Yeah, and I'm happy again, like to give a little list if you want to include it. So with the Mohawk products, so if I'm staining or coloring, let's be general, I guess, I like to use the aerosol can. So as we talked about, the 2 most common woods that I work with anyway would be teak and walnut. So for teak, really a lot of it, if it's in good condition, you don't have to color at all. So that's the good thing about teak. What you see is its natural coloring. So often it's sanding, using a sealer, and then using a top coat. I like satin. I don't like anything glossy. So I use a satin pre-cat lacquer, and it comes in an aerosol can. So I just spray those. I actually don't have a sprayer. It's something I probably need to invest in. But yeah, I don't. And I refinish every day.
I have a sprayer and I'm scared to use it. So those aerosol cans,
interesting.
I pay for the convenience of having it all like in a little compressed can. So you know, there's something to be said about that. But you know, I definitely think I've seen people use sprayers. And I'm like, man, that makes it so easy. But
yeah, and I think I it's a comfort zone thing for me. I really need to jump out of that comfort zone and give it a go, like I'm trying to encourage others.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I've heard that you don't have to jump 80% out of your comfort zone. That people that are successful, as long as they jump 5% out of their comfort zone, it's that constant growth day after day of just 5% more, just 5% uncomfortable is actually, they found statistically, where you are the most successful. Because if you're too uncomfortable, then you're not, you're going to pull back. But if you stay, stagnant, you're not going to grow. So that 5% is really, really important. So you can come borrow mine. I'm not using it right now.
I might. And then walnut. Sorry, can I touch on walnut?
Oh,
walnut. So again, if you follow me, my biggest selling line is Broyhill Brasilia. So it's an American product made in the 60s, and I have a wait list, but I restore top to toe every single piece that comes in. And I do use a stain for that. So a stain often just goes on the raw wood, and then you follow that up with your sealer and then your toner, so your color toner. So again, walnut, I would use the Mohawk aerosol can, and I would choose Perfect Brown, and then the Satin pre-cut lacquer on top. But again, all of these things, they require a little bit of skill. So definitely trial and error, knowing, where to place, how close, how far away when you're spraying is really important, because you don't want lines. And again, I'm always happy. I love what I do and I love questions. So I'm definitely, if you're one of those people who's like, I want to do this, but I don't know what to do. Like, I'm one of those people. I love people asking me and going, hey, I want to give this a go. Like, what should I do? So please, definitely reach out to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is a skill. And if you're going to start on a piece, maybe if you've never done it before, that you don't like, you're not as attached to, and then start on an area like the backside or this, the bottom bottom corner or something, just to see. And then, with your spray, you're going to have that overspray. Like, you're not just going to, you've got to have it so it's clean. At least that's what my tip on that is.
Yeah. My tip, if anyone's using toners, so the aerosol cans of any kind, is to mist. So if you're seeing that line go on as you spray, you're actually too close. So I think air freshener in my head. So you really just want that fine mist.
Yeah.
And move with the grain too.
Yeah. So one of the areas that I've dealt with, and I just, it just depends on the piece and how much the damage is, for a teak piece where especially on the edges, the back edges, that the whole chunk of teak will come out. It'll be exposed particle board. How do you deal with that piece? Because that's so often something that we see.
Usually Bondo.
And then do you paint over it? Like, do you do
that? I think if you're going to start with a piece, probably don't choose a piece where there's structural damage like that, because you do need to go into that more refined process of, filling and then grain painting. And I honestly think it is a little bit more of a technical skill. So if you're trying to do that first up, it might be very frustrating and disappointing for you. So it's so annoying, because you're right. I find that with teak all the time, and often they didn't have a lot of legs. I find so many teak have just got that plinth base. If that's just been moved around a little too much, there's like chunks missing out of it.
I mean, personally, I will just go in and get some similar color stain, and just stain the particle board, just because it's like I'm trying to flip it, and I just disclose it on my thing. Because honestly, as a reseller, now this is not you, because you're high end and do everything to the perfection, which is beautiful and I love. But some people would rather pay a little less money for a piece that's not perfectly refinished than just disclosing, hey, this is kind of messed up. And people are usually okay with it, as long as
absolutely. And I think that's such a good point, because I think two things, like from what you've said, have stood out. I think being your genuine self is really important, and I think being genuine and fully transparent about the condition of the piece is so important. I don't know about you, but often if you're selling something vintage, there is expected flaws. So even when I have entirely refinished something, there can be minor flaws still there. So it is just a fact of life when you're working with vintage pieces. And often by disclosing, 85% of the time people are like, no worries. Like they love vintage and they understand that this is part of the course with what they're getting.
Absolutely. When I go into a vintage or thrift store and I'm personally shopping for myself, I'm like, it's vintage. Like it withstood 80 years of wear and tear, and it still looks this good. Or I like the fact that it's kind of got that wear and tear look. It just kind of depends on each individual piece for sure. But I've never found, usually the people that give me a hard time are the ones that honestly don't end up buying anyhow. People that are overly like, can you give me a discount? Can you give me a discount? Like there are most of the time, those people don't even, after I'm like, yeah, I'll give you a discount, they don't even respond back. So I've learned to figure out what kind of customer that I want to deal with.
Exactly.
And then it's also, how long the piece is sat and stuff like that. So
and I love your hardcore attitude too, where you're like, they offered me half, so they are blocked.
Immediately block. I'm done. I don't even want you.
Power.
There are 7 billion people in the world, and like I don't even know however many billionaire, millionaire in America. I'm not even gonna fight. Like there's always those people that are just not your people, and they want to deal, and that's fine. And when I was doing web design, we would call them tire kickers because they wanted a website for $500, but they wanted to call you on Friday night and ask you to do something, and then tell you, well, it shouldn't cost that much because my brother's sister's daughter said that she could do it for $25. And you're like, I don't even want you. Immediately, no, block.
Yeah. I think too, there are buyers who think they want vintage, but really they want new. And so again, those people that are asking a million questions, if they're not coming to look at the piece first, which again, I highly encourage if you're buying vintage, then I always feel like it's a no. It's not going to be a good outcome for you or me.
And as I'm dealing with a customer, if I sense that they're like, on the fence, I make sure to say, all sales are final. Like, absolutely, you can pay me in advance, but I'm not giving your money back. Like, you're coming to get it. And, I always say that because if for some reason they do come back, I can say, well, we did say all sales are final. Like, I have it in writing, but I've never had anybody, come back and ask for a refund. I think maybe in all 5 years that I've been doing this, I've had 4 people come back and kind of like be kind of weird or ugly to me. And, I may have had the financial freedom to just be like, don't worry about it. Just bring it back because I already had buyers lined up. It just depends on my mood, the time of the month, whether I was going to. Most of the time people are 100%, satisfied. They understand how Facebook Marketplace works because that's my biggest place of selling.
Okay.
Yeah. So have you had anybody like after restore? I mean, because you're taking a piece that either they brought to you or they're buying from you. Have you had anybody be disappointed after that? And how do you deal with that?
I think for me, I do ship nationwide. So the only times I've had a problem is during the transport process. So I do always try and take photos of the product before it leaves, but sometimes it arrives and it might have a little ding or a little scratch. And if that's the case, depending on its location, if it's in Austin, I have no problem going, I'll just go there and I'll fix it for them. But being interstate, it's a little bit trickier. So you're right. I think I weigh up a lot of things. If they're a repeat customer and they've bought 10 other pieces from me, then yes, I will definitely look at compensating them in some way. But it's tricky. I think again, like transport, that's the most paranoid aspect for me. Even when people come here, I'm like, bring a blanket. We're going to wrap it. Like, it's just people don't think.
And if it's vintage, like hutch pieces that have glass, I'm like,
yes.
I mean, my like anxiety. I'm like, as soon as someone sends me something like, oh, I found this. Do you want it? And I'm like, it's got glass. No, I'm done. I don't want it. I'm done. I don't want to do it. I want to
Yeah,
deal with
or
wood
like you
all day
said, it
long, but
depends
glass,
on the
like this
day, right?
big
Like
piece, the biggest.
sometimes even really big pieces, I'm like, I just don't know.
Yeah.
But
Who do
yeah,
you use for shipping nationwide?
I use UShip, but I don't like to use UShip. So I do have my own couriers now, I guess, just from building a network over the years. I do suggest if you use UShip that you just read through the reviews solidly. So you want to make sure that they have 5 stars, and you want to ask them some questions again about their wrapping process. So I've had a few problems with UShip, but I will say basically it's been pretty good as
Yeah, for
another
what it
source.
is. I still do my own deliveries because I'm so concerned about the transport process.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, why don't you just hire somebody on TaskRabbit? And I'm like, yes, because I would like some college boys carrying a mid-century piece around. Like that
Mhm.
just sounds like a recipe for disaster. So, but I have had somebody come and get a couch, and they hired somebody here in Austin, and they did a great job of
Mhm.
wrapping it. So, just reading those, stars
Mhm.
and reviews, and once
Yeah.
you find a courier, man, treat your courier
Oh my gosh,
like,
absolutely. I feed mine every time he's here. He gets beer or he gets breakfast, like
yeah,
depending on the time of day.
yeah,
They are worth their weight in gold. And like you, we're not in central Austin too. So I think sometimes people want items delivered. I get a lot of buyers that buy sight unseen too. So
yeah. Me
again,
too. They can't come pick up their pieces, and honestly, that's one of my biggest tips for people when
yeah.
you are selling locally is like I have made $300-400 on one day just by charging delivery, and then stacking and putting, not stacking
Mm,
the furniture, but putting a lot of different like
mm,
art pieces, of rug, a dresser, and lamp, and then I just do deliveries. And if it's a smaller item like a lamp, if it's they pay $150
mm.
for a lamp, I don't want to charge them $75, $150 for
Yes.
delivery. So I just said, hey, I'm going to be in the area. I'll tack on delivery for $25. And so I've just made an extra
Yeah.
$25. And maybe I've driven
Mhm,
5 miles from my last location. So it's a great
mhm,
way to make extra money for people
mhm.
that are doing that. And if you are wanting to get into reselling, but you're not totally sure yet, just even maybe offering your services to a reseller if you have a truck, and being like, I love, I love vintage, I
So
love reselling,
true.
but I'm not ready. But
Yeah.
that's a great way to make some extra cash on the side as
Yeah.
well.
And I also think, and I'm sure it's happened to you, people like to meet you. So when
Yeah.
you're doing your own deliveries, that's another strategy to form relationships for potential future buyers. So again, I agree. Sometimes I do have couriers locally that I use and trust, but delivering and then just having that personal contact can really help your business in the future.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I love going into people's homes and
Yes.
seeing
Yes.
how cool people
Mm-hmm.
decorate. I mean, there are some of
Mm-hmm.
the human race is just amazing and so beautiful and vast and diverse in what they like and how they style things that I wouldn't have never been like, oh, I would have never like done that. That is so
Mm-hmm.
cool. So
Mm-hmm.
I love doing that, love getting to know them. Like repeat customers are probably my repeat customers are some of the ones that I have spent the most time with because they're always wanting delivery, and then I sit and I hang out, and then whenever I'm
Mm-hmm.
in Georgetown, I might be like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm over here,
Yeah.
you want to go stop for coffee, and
Yeah.
become friends with some of these people that
Yeah.
continuing to facilitate that relationship with me. So that's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fun. So okay, so before we sign off, is there anything else that you would want to like say to our listeners, some tips, a funny story that you have?
Yeah. Look, honestly, I just think as a buyer, don't be afraid to ask the seller the questions that are important to you. Always look at a piece and make sure that where you can, if you can't, make sure you get photos from all angles. As a seller, again, find your tribe, find the people that you look up to and admire, follow them, do your research, like take the time to really get to know the industry. But also, most importantly, don't be afraid to dive in and just give it a go. We've all been there and we've all been unsure. But if you don't try, even if you fail, if you don't try, you will never know. So that would be, I guess, my biggest tip.
Perfectly well stated. I love that. So Tell our listeners again where they can find you on Instagram
Mhm.
and view your inventory.
Sure. So Instagram, my business name is Modern Arc, and my handle is at modern_arc_mid-century. And in real life, so pieces that are not there, you will find me also. I have a space at Potluck Vintage in Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heidi, for joining us on this podcast. It was a pleasure to
Thank
have
you so much.
You're welcome. And join us next week as we continue to learn more about the vintage reselling or reselling market. And if you are looking for things that I am selling, you can look at my inventory at curvevulture.com. And don't forget that I do have a $7 beginning reseller course so that you can turn trash into cash, because part of my story is picking up stuff on the side of the road and paying off $10,000 worth of debt in 6 months. And if I can do it as a mom of 7 that homeschools her kids, you can do it too. Until next week.